So today I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a flavour of our new project called Climate Forth. But before that, I'm actually going to give you a little bit of a recap of some of the work that our partnership has done over the last 10 years. As Susan said, the Inner Forth Futures Partnership, or previously the Inner Forth Landscape Initiative Partnership, has been, well, we think quite busy around what we call the Upper Firth of Forth. And so I thought, as we're looking today sort of into the future, but also a bit into the past, I'd try and show you where our new project has come from. So you may recognise a few of the things that we're talking about here. If you've been to some of the previous FNH conferences, if you've picked up one of the previous FNH journals, you might recognise some of our work from that. Hopefully it's not too much of a repetition, it's a nice reminder perhaps of what's come before. And you might see some familiar faces shortly, so I make no apologies for that. If you have any questions, I'm really pleased to answer them, or you can, of course, get in touch with us in all the usual ways. So, yes, a little bit about who we are, what we're up to, a bit about our previous work, particularly thinking about our large project, IFLI, a little bit about some of the work we've done collaboratively, something called the Inner Forth Habitat Network, a conference that we ran in late 2019, thinking specifically about heritage tourism, and our Wanderings and Windings project. And then, yes, coming on latterly to talk about our current focus, the Climate Forth project. We do like our acronyms in our partnership. Forth is short for Furthering Our Resilience Through Heritage. I'm sure at some point we will run out of Forth-based acronyms. Hopefully, I'm sure you're thinking, hopefully it will be soon, but no, we are still going. So for those of you who may have heard of us before, be familiar what we've been up to, but also for those who are perhaps newer to our work, the Inner Forth Futures Partnership has worked around the Upper Firth of Forth since about 2011, 2012. We're a formal partnership of 9 different organisations, 9 different members, and we work roughly from, I say very roughly, from sort of Stirling Old Bridge down to Blackness and Rosyth. Now, I'm not going to pay too much attention to the different colours of blue and hashing on this map, but needless to say that we surround the Upper Firth of Forth. We're very much interested in parts of Stirling, Clackmannanshire, Falkirk and Fife that surround this bit of the central Scotland that we call the Upper Firth of Forth. We are interested in natural, built and historic heritage, things, places, stories, what makes this area of Scotland this area of Scotland. And personally, I think it's really important to think about that whole suite of heritage, because you can't understand what you have here in the present day and how the landscape might look or be managed in the future if you don't think about what came before and why the landscape is how it is today and all those different gamuts that make it up. So our partnership has been focused on 4 key objectives most recently. We want to try and deliver the legacy of some of our previous work, not least because we're required to do that by our previous funders, but also it's a very good thing to do. We want to try and promote the heritage of the area. We do this in a variety of ways, and hopefully we find ways to enable others to do that as well. Really importantly, we want to try and empower and work with communities so that lots of different people can take a role in managing and promoting their local heritage. And it's definitely their local heritage, it's our heritage. It doesn't belong to one person or one site or one organisation. It's very much something that is there. It's that sense of place and that sense of ownership and belonging that people have in a particular area. And lastly, and slightly complicatedly, we wanted to try and increase the area's resilience by piloting ways to develop both habitat networks and ways for the area and its heritage to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So that last one you'll see a little bit more in some of the talk as we go on. Now, many of you will know the area incredibly well. You will know that there's a fantastic range of habitats and species and sites in the area. You'll know a lot about perhaps the different designations that the area holds, whether that's SSSIs, whether that's SACs, SPAs, and perhaps Ramsar sites. And I'm just going to mention here on the right, this is Wester Moss, just Melissa mentioned it earlier. Fantastic site, yeah, near Fulham, if you do get a chance to pop out and see another re-wetted bog. That's very exciting. It's not just about the natural heritage, it's very definitely about that built and historic heritage and the cultural heritage as well. Fantastic sites that you know, are still standing, but perhaps things are a little bit more hidden as well for the archaeologists amongst us. There's all these aspects and stories help to explain the landscape and give us that flavour of the importance that this area has, both historically and in the current day. But in amongst all this heritage, we have a really busy, active landscape. There's lots of communication links, there's lots of development pressures, and it's really important for commerce and industry as well. Something that those of us who live and work and travel around the landscape can't ignore in any way. But in amongst all of that, we also have fantastic opportunities to get out and about and explore the area. And these are some of the things that we like to try and encourage through the landscape as well. We want to show that there are fantastic places and ways to get out and explore that heritage in the Inner Forth. If you want to go for a walk, if you want to perhaps see specific species and sites, you don't have to head very far afield. You can do all of that on your doorstep. And perhaps if you so choose, you can do that on foot or by bike, by wheel as well. So just thinking back very briefly, I mentioned the Inner Forth Landscape Initiative, and this is really where it started for our partnership. We worked on with some fantastic funding through the Heritage Lottery Fund to both develop and then deliver a £4 million project that delivered about 54 projects across what we call, again, the Inner Forth area. Someone was mentioning return on investment earlier. Apologies, I can't quite remember who, but it did remind me of this slide. And it's always fascinating to see actually the amount of money that you put in and the amount of impact that it can have when you crunch the numbers at the end. There's a huge amount more about this project on our website, so I'm not going to tell you too much more. Needless to say, we delivered with our range of partners and a huge number of volunteers and other organisations. That's a collective we. We delivered a huge amount in the landscape, whether that was looking at conserving and restoring some historical natural sites, whether that was about increasing access, whether physical or intellectual, to the landscape, or perhaps developing skills training, research and recording. So I thought what I'd attempt to do is play this video, if it works, fingers crossed, because that will be able to tell you a lot more about the partnership than I can, and then I'll come back in just a moment.
There's a lovely museum habitats throughout the Inner Forth, one which is Blackhead Wetlands. And I wonder down a track thinking, walking past the pylons, it's an old tile factory. And then you just kind of follow the track down and suddenly it opens up. And you've got these sticky areas of grassland, and then a little bit further across the boardwalk, it's just how quickly inside each one of the work being done the second time, and it kind of all looks like it's just falls into there.
We spent a few weeks down there looking at the wetlands, but what you guys want to do is the change that's taken place over the last year or so. We're just across the road from the Blackhead Wetlands, that's sandwiched between the River Forth and us. We run different activities down in the Blackhead Wetlands. We engage with a bunch of different partner agencies like the RSPB. You guys know those haircut factories from there? 100 years ago. So that kind of embedded in the child's conscience, the idea of that wetland as a resource for them and their families for the rest of their lives. We're getting support to deliver learning experiences that we can't deliver in school.
I've spoken to lots of people who just didn't realise that ongoing cover in ivy was that significant. Working with something that strip that back deep and actually get people asking, what is this building? When you start telling them that this was the first industrial distillery in Scotland, it's not significant to the local people. Drove past every single day, we just hadn't even questioned what was there. Adding vision heritage to that landscape that previous was there.
The high up, because we're talking about coal, which is the spoil from the old coal industry, there used to be mining pits here. Going down today is a lovely green area with colourful wildflowers, fresh air, bird song, and back in the coal mining days, it was, big, black, deep landscape, no wildlife around. But then this is a very important site because we actually have an open rich habitat here for the rich species grassland. And I would say I do meet a lot of ex-coal miners who remember this place when it was bleak and black, and they love this place and it's coming to walk and just enjoy the picture. I think people appreciate the opportunity to speak to experts and practice as well, and also network with people. So, extremely lucky to be part of this diverse program. I watched them so much volunteers to work with.
You see the landscape, whatever you're painting, in a completely different way. The area is just full of potential. You just wonder where one is done, you sit with paintings and red. I started off with watercolors. Italy was the one that sparked it, and this is the big thing about this play, that it gives you a feel, gives you the opportunity of trying something out.
There's always wildlife close to the subject sensitive water. Now we're taking a picture of Pocket Rock, smoky chimneys, parks, together as landscape. So,
It's cement that holds things together for heritage.
Italy have given us the tools, and given us the opportunity of learning. And I think it's really new life and awakened the whole area of people's interest. Having that understanding, having that knowledge is hugely important, because that's what we do. Thank you.
Personally, I'm interested not just in the natural history, cultural history, the archaeology, and more. They're excited about stuff.
So that's a bit of an overview of some of our previous work that wrapped up in 2018. which feels like quite a long time ago, and it was really, especially when we've had the last couple of years of changed. Oh, let's not play that again. Let's try and escape past. Sort of changed ways of working. But one of the things I mentioned that we were working on as a partnership is thinking about habitat networks in the area and thinking about how we help areas to adapt. And we had an opportunity in 2018, 2019 to work both with our partnership and with quite a wide range of environmental NGOs across parts of the Central Scotland Green Network area in the middle of Central Wales of Scotland to create something called the Inner Forth Habitat Network. Now, really, this is a concept, and there's a document that we've put together to try and explain the process that we went through and the rationale for doing this. But I think Melissa's talk in particular kind of highlighted that idea of, well, you have habitats in interesting, good or bad conditions in different parts of central Scotland, different parts of Scotland. And what's really important is both to try and look at those sites individually, but think about connectivity and how you can perhaps work across landscapes to join up sites and to both work with other landowners as well and other agencies. To improve the sort of state of the natural world on a larger scale. And so what we did collectively was to put this habitat network together, was to think about where some of the best places for people and nature might be in central Scotland, taking what we called a model approach. Now this, I will be honest, this is an approach of people sitting in a room with post-it notes and with maps. It was a very person-centered approach. We did use existing data sets. We did use a wider local knowledge. This was not plugging lots and lots of data into a GIS system and seeing what it would kick back. There are other ways and other organisations that have done that, and hopefully the two sit hand in hand and help think about where you can deliver work for different habitats in our area. But really, we went through a collaborative approach. We wanted to think about how this work together might help inform where landscape scale work should happen, maybe which habitats are most important in certain areas, and whether you should be maybe creating new habitat or enhancing the existing habitats that are there. And an additional reason for doing this is sort of linked a bit into the Scottish planning system. So there's a principle in National Planning Framework 3 of a national ecological network. I'll be honest and say I've not yet looked at NPF 4 that came out earlier this week. There is a really fantastic focus on climate and biodiversity in that. But we wanted to show at this scale in central Scotland how a national ecological network could be compiled and what it could look like. So really briefly, we considered both the existing habitats in the area, we considered ecosystem services, so the things that those habitats provide for us, and we considered opportunities that are in the area, whether that's perhaps thinking about different organisations that might be able to deliver work or favourable landowners as well. And we ended up with this mapped vision that you see part of on the right-hand side. It's quite colourful because we had 5 different types of habitats that we were looking at, but it's also quite a large map. So if you fancy taking a look at this in much more detail, please head on to our website. And what's really important to say is that this is a vision. This is a way of a group of organisations thinking about how habitats could look in the area. And if you had to make a really difficult choice between delivering work for one type of habitat or another type of habitat, this is a way that you could consider it. What it's absolutely not doing is coming in and saying, for example, if you happen to be in one of these green areas down here, that we'd like to come and plant loads and loads of trees there. We know there's lots of other things happening on that particular plot of land. But when we're looking at that really big macro scale, we think that trees, for example, woodland, is one of the most important things that could be achieved there. And as you can see at the bottom here, we looked at other types of habitats. We looked at woodlands, hedgerows and street trees, looked at grassland and open mosaic habitat, peatland and heathland, rivers and wetland and intertidal areas. So we looked at quite a suite of activities and habitats across the area. And as you can imagine, we had some quite exciting discussion and sort of head scratching moments thinking about both where these were in the area, because it was a good test of our local knowledge, but also if you had to make a choice to show this on a map, as I sort of showed in the previous slide, which one would you choose? Now, did we get this right? Well, I don't know. I guess the proof's in the pudding. But what we tried to do as well was to make this accessible to other people, both to explain the process that we went through, why we did it, to help maybe others consider thinking working at a landscape scale in this way. But this also helped us to kind of explain our approach so that we can use this when we talk to funders. And certainly I know that our partnership and others who we work with have used this type of information to secure funding from others, including NatureScot. So we can explain where some of the work that we would like to deliver has come from, and it has that sort of considered approach. We have a set of habitat action plans in our document, and as I said, it's proved quite useful. And the reason I mention this is because it's one of the things that's helped us to think a little bit about the work that we'd like to deliver through the Climate Forth project, and I'll come on to that in just a moment. I also mentioned that we'd been working on delivering something called Wanderings and Windings. This was very much about, again, looking for opportunities to encourage people to get out and about in the landscape. And this is something that we did a lot of through the IFLI programme, and we would like to do more of through the Climate Forth programme. The IFLI project got us thinking about how we encourage people to explore the area. The Wanderings and Windings project was very much thinking about how we encourage people to get out and spend more time in the area, perhaps go on a day-long walk or cycle, how you move around the Forth area and the type of heritage that you might spot along the way. So perhaps encouraging those folk who might head out further north for an adventure, for a sort of day-long trip, saying, well, actually, again, you can do that from your front door here in the Forth. There's lots and lots of opportunities. And again, we were lucky enough to be funded by the lottery for this project. And these were some of the things that we were able to promote during COVID as well, when it was a bit more challenging to get out and about. So we were delighted that folk were able to enjoy these. And thinking a little bit about different audiences as well. Apologies, this is a bit of a jump around. We, again, thinking about how you encourage people to come to the area, how you encourage people to understand and learn about some of the fantastic heritage that we have here. Well, it's not just about folk perhaps like you and me who come to conferences like this, have this personal interest. There'll be lots of other ways that people come and interact with heritage in the area. And it's probably not escaped you that there's lots of tour groups that might come into the area, particularly thinking about film and TV locations, mention no names. If you're an Outlander fan, which perhaps you're not quite the audience, who knows. But there's lots of folk who come into the area and sort of interact with heritage, but perhaps have one view of it, and it would be fantastic to show them a little bit more. So we met with a wide range, I say wide range, met with 55 very friendly individuals who worked in the tourism sector back in 2019. And we asked them a few questions around, well, you know, how can we encourage people to explore beyond these honeypot sites? What are the gaps? What are the challenges? And actually, how can we make this sort of tourism offer a bit more sustainable? You know, we have a very large landscape. We're lucky to have, you know, some great road and rail links. But actually, if we're moving lots of people around by bus, you know, does that prove some challenges? And actually, some of these sites are very small and they can't cope with lots and lots of people. How do we choose where to encourage people to go, why and when? So we had a really productive day. I think we certainly learned a lot from them. Hopefully they found out a bit more about the Inner Forth. They had their horizons widened. And I mention this again because this is another way that we have been trying to shape our thinking over the last few years. And in the last few slides, what I'll show you is a flavour of our new project, Climate Forth. So again, Climate Forth, we're still working at that landscape scale. We're lucky enough to have a development grant from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So thank you very much if you're a National Lottery player. And we are looking to secure what's called a delivery grant from the lottery. So we have a small amount of money to work up our ideas. And in February, we'll be submitting, well, we hope, touch wood, submitting a grant to the lottery for about £1.5 million, a bit less than that probably. That would hopefully run us over 3 years from 2023 to 2026 to then deliver these fantastic aspects of work. So perhaps when we're a touch further on, I'll be able to come back and tell you a bit more about that. Well, again, we're working across the inner Forth area, and apologies here, this isn't terribly clear, but again, that same kind of blue area that I showed you before. This time we're really thinking about our most deprived communities. So we're thinking about those communities that have multiple challenges. We're very interested in working with young people and businesses. But what are we trying to do? Well, we want to show that heritage can be the asset on which to build a sustainable recovery for the inner Forth. We're thinking about how we can deliver work that pilots adaptation to change, that pilots ways to help communities increase their resilience, and pilots opportunities to invest in heritage as an asset. And I keep saying the word pilot because that's very much how we're selling it. We want to think about new ways of doing things. There might be things that have been done somewhere else, perhaps not here in the inner Forth, or perhaps we're looking at working with a new group. And the next few slides just give you a bit of a flavour that I will whiz through to keep us to time of what we're hoping to deliver. So we also want to, as I said, looking at the resilience for communities, looking at managing different heritage assets, and thinking a bit about that economic resilience as well. So hopefully those project themes are things that you can sort of see trickling through some of that work we've been doing since 2018. And again, apologies, we've got some repeated photos here, but 2 years sitting in the office means there's a little bit of a photo challenge when you come to these things. So some of the things we want to try and do are working with communities to deliver local resilience plans. We want to try and put together a youth panel so that they can help us to make decisions about their place. We want to work with community heritage groups to provide and offer training and mentoring so that they can think about how the sites they have a particular interest in might be affected by the impacts of climate change. We want to try and deliver some work to a very small number of heritage sites, 2 green spaces and 2 historic heritage sites, to make them more resilient and thinking about climate change adaptation there as well. We're looking forward to working with Sustrans to rebrand the Round the Forth route, perhaps give it a slightly unique branding so that, again, it thinks about that kind of visitor offer, and working with tourist businesses about green tourism as well. And what I'm just going to pop through are to a couple of things that we're looking forward to hopefully delivering and that folk in this room might have a particular interest in. I know we have some SWT members here, and one of your sites is the Alloa Inch in the middle of the Forth. It's a site that's quite interesting. I'm sure Rory, the area manager, will be able to tell you a lot more. But essentially, it's a really dynamic site. The Forth is very dynamic, that tide coming in and out every day. And it has the potential to look quite different in the future, depending on how you might choose to manage it. So what we would like to do, both between the SWT and the RSPB, is to create some kind of virtual reality product or thing. And I say thing because we're still working out exactly what that might be, so that we can start to talk to people about how some of these sites that are quite challenging to get to and understand might look in the future. So that's a kind of VR type thing. We want to try and work on 2 sites, one Rannoch Park in Falkirk in Grangemouth, and then Glendrevin Drive in Raploch in Stirling. These 2 sites, there are a few photos of here, to make them more resilient in the face of climate change. So we're particularly thinking about how water moves in this landscape. So thinking about making these sites more biodiverse as well. And these are rather small pictures, apologies, but we're thinking about things like tree planting, wildflower meadows, seasonal wetlands. So nothing radically, different to you might see in other places, but actually we want to monitor and evaluate this, perhaps using things like remote sensors. So thinking about how some of that monitoring and evaluation can be quite unique. And then coming on to some of our built heritage, our historic heritage, We've had the fantastic Page Park architects working with us incredibly hard over this summer to try and think about, well, where could we deliver a very small amount of work? And I say small, we're thinking about £50,000 per site. So you can't deliver huge, big projects with that relatively small intervention of money. But we'd like to maybe work on 2 sites. We're proposing Sauchiehall and the Valleyfield Estate. So Sauchiehall in Clackmannanshire, Valleyfield Estate in Fife, and thinking about the very first stages of longer term plans that we might be able to encourage to happen with this investment. And in Sauchiehall, thinking about how sort of council owned assets and community spaces can move towards net zero. So here we're thinking about ventilation. And with Valleyfield, we're thinking about actually how you can secure some of the assets or the structures on the site which are being lost due to neglect and, you know, things like sort of vegetation growth. So there's quite a lot of varied things that we're hoping to do through the project. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to pick up one of our papers, but I would say we have a pretty small team. We're hoping to expand that if we get the lottery funding. So I hope that I'll be able to come back and tell you a little bit more about this in due course. And thank you very much for listening. Apologies for going on.